Welcome to our podcasts, Wise Black Nanas, Life Coaching Between the Dash. Hey, what do you do when it feels like life has thrown you a few too many challenges, knocked you down, in the bed, hard to talk about even with your best friend challenges, and it feels like the challenges are winning? Wouldn't it be nice to hear from your Nana? Or a stand-in Wise Black Nana? Well, they are Wise Black Nanas, Charlotte Walker, PhD, and Joanne Early, MS, two mature women with over 70 plus years of combined coaching and mentoring, professional human resources, and business experience. The wonderful news is, these Wise Black Nanas are still living and learning about this amazing life, about resilience and grit, gratitude and appreciation, and the extraordinary power of love and friendships, being positive and supportive, and learning from others. Welcome to Wise Black Nanas. Let's listen in.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to our podcast. This is Joanne, one half of Wise Black Nanas, and we are so excited because this is our June broadcast, and we are publishing again a repeat of our Juneteenth broadcast as we are encouraging everybody to celebrate our history, our American history, and our most recent federal holiday. There are things going on all throughout the month of June. So we're just here to introduce this episode and to tell you a little bit about what's going on in our areas. Dr. Charlotte?
Hi, I'm Dr. Charlotte Walker, PhD, and I'm joining Joanne today just to kind of give us a little update as to what's going to be happening this June. And we're very excited to bring you some very good news, and we hope you're excited too. We have learned that the presidential Barack Obama Center will actually be opening on Juneteenth, which
Yay!
is June, which is June 19th. And this
Yeah.
is, I'm from what I've seen online and what I've seen in magazines, this is just not your typical center. This is actually a center of learning and education and
Yeah.
yeah. So, which is what he is about. He really is about leadership and having compassion. And he has a contract with the city of Chicago or the county of Chicago for.
Uh-huh.
So there's an actual library at the center. Students
Very cool.
go there and study and learn, have that quiet time. There's a basketball court where he and others can play basketball, but just the enormity of books that I have seen just looking around, and they're everywhere. They're not just in a library; they're just everywhere, and they're on various subjects. It just fills your chest with lots of pride just to know that
Yeah.
has a compassion and caring and
I know. We miss that, don't we?
yeah, and leadership to know that these are things that are needed in our society today.
Yeah. Right.
Even if you don't have a leadership role, you still need that leadership in your life.
Mm.
So I'm very proud, and Joe and I will probably figure out how we can seek a road trip in
I know. Sounds like a road trip to
before it
me.
starts snowing.
Definitely not in the winter.
Yeah.
Definitely not in the winter. Yeah,
So
we're so thrilled about that. During the Juneteenth podcast, we talked a little, introduced to some, and presented to others a little information about Mrs. Opal Lee. This woman, gosh, Shirley, you're actually living in the same city where she's
right.
living. She's known as the grandmother of Juneteenth because she did a lot to get this holiday on the books. And she's so well known for the fact that she walked from Fort Worth all the way to Washington, D.C. to shine the light on the need to make this a federal holiday. So she's now 97 and probably won't be doing too many more walks, but at least we wanted to just highlight her and the presidential center, Barack Obama's center, that is opening on Juneteenth in Chicago. So we just wanted to highlight those two events.
And since I live in the Fort Worth area, there's lots of activities that are going on online
I bet.
and different, black markets and just a lot of online stuff and resources.
Cool.
So please, if you're in this area, try to take advantage of as many things as you possibly
I
can,
I
because
think
that
if you
will
live,
take your
oops,
time.
I was going to say, I think if you live almost anywhere, it just seems like in lots of areas, there is just a huge number of events, parades, festivals, food
Oh
tours,
yeah, of course
just
there's food court.
right, right. Just all kind of friendly celebrations that's celebrating Black culture. So our message is to just get out there, look for something to do,
Enjoy
and they are
yourself.
occurring the whole month of June. So it's not just on that one day. There are activities that are occurring.
So enjoy yourself. Joanne lives in the Bay Area. Uh, I don't know if you guys knew that we are split between states, red and blue states. But anyway, we make it work.
We do. We do make it work, don't we? We do make it
So
work.
there's I'm sure a lot of activity going on in the Bay Area.
Absolutely. In many of our Bay Area cities, lots of things going on to celebrate this day. And if we didn't need to have something good to feel good about and to celebrate, ooh, we certainly need it now.
Yes,
So thank you
absolutely.
for tuning in and hear a little bit more about Juneteenth. You know, Dr. Charlotte and I both love history. The good, the bad, the ugly details, the stories, and all the truths and untruths. We are just coming off celebrating a brand new, nationally recognized, passed by Congress, signed by President Joseph Biden, a new federal holiday, Juneteenth. Yeah, the one with that name, the one that's been around for quite some time, the one that we hear that name and recognize, that's steeped in historical significance for Black people and really for all of America. So months ago, Dr. Charlotte and I talked about the Juneteenth holiday as a potential topic and subject for one of our episodes, primarily because it was recently made and became the newest federal holiday. And this is during a period of time in our country's history when our rights are being reversed and trampled, sometimes erased or diminished by our courts and our Congress. So, have an episode about an event or something that occurred almost 160 years ago after Texas slaves were freed. Preparing an episode on Juneteenth would not only be interesting and refresh our own history, the timing and the subject are just so current, given the world we live in today. And as usual, wise Black nanas can dive into learning something new. That's always a treat for us. So, of course, what made this more of a burning issue for me was an inquiry that I got just about my own history with Juneteenth. Was one of those, hey, Nana, what is Juneteenth really? Well, I had to admit that I didn't have much of a history with Juneteenth per se. Yes, I grew up in the South during real segregation, when segregation was legal. I went to all Black schools where I did not have to take a Black history class or belong to the Black Student Union. We were the Black Student Union, and we were active participants also in the history of that time. So I knew about the delayed 2+ year notification to Texas slaves about the Emancipation Proclamation from my U.S. history studies. And we had U.S. history every year. But I don't remember that I knew about the celebration or really what it meant to the slaves and eventually to all Black people. I just don't remember that there was a lot of effort put on it or that we had celebrations in my community. So I don't remember it so much as a holiday. So just to set that time period, and this is a very, very short version of a long, ugly stain on our American history. So June 19th, 1865, the actual day that commemorates the beginning of Juneteenth, when federal Union troops landed in Galveston, Texas, took over control of Texas, and assured the liberation of Texas slaves. And at that time, it was estimated to be in excess of 250,000 enslaved people. And they were thought to be the last large group in a whole state to be freed. So the Union troops enforced a federal order that really had gone into effect some 2.5 years or 2+ years earlier. The commemoration of June 19th was observed by freed slaves in Texas the following year. So that's kind of how Juneteenth got started and kept going. And so they kept this celebration going year after year. So the practice or custom of observing that, quote, Liberation Day was spread as former freed slaves moved to other areas of the country and continued the celebration and to bring that celebration to that particular area where they moved. And all of those stories about what happened on June 19th, 1865. So just from a personal note, I moved to Oakland in 1983, 1984, somewhere around there. And I was looking, with summer, I was looking for something to take the kids to for a summer outing, and getting to know our community better, and saw the advertisement for Juneteenth. I kind of knew what that was, but I didn't know of it to be, a celebration or anything like that. So I saw the advertisement for Juneteenth, and it was held at Defirmary Park in West Oakland. So we went. We went and we all learned a lot. It was a festive environment. There were colorful booths, decorations all over. There was a parade with black cowboys on horses. I know we could not even imagine horses in Oakland, but there were black cowboys in all their Western regalia on their horses. It was beautiful. It was great food, all kind of civic announcements, some speeches by dignitaries, but people were dressed in Afrocentric attire. And honestly, it was really my first exposure to a festival or to a celebration like that. I just remember it being a very positive experience and one that I attended and look forward to attending for many years after. So with June 19th becoming a federal holiday, I'm just excited to see evidence that there continues to be a huge resurgence of interest in June 19th. So while preparing for this episode, I happened to run across a Gallup poll that was taken right around the time when the holiday was being proclaimed and back in 2021, that 69% of African Americans knew something or little about Juneteenth. 40% of Hispanic Americans knew something or a lot about Juneteenth. And 31% of white Americans knew something or a lot about Juneteenth. Not bad, not bad. I certainly hope and I'm sure that if that poll has been refreshed, it would probably be a lot higher now. So Juneteenth has had other names and it still has other names. It's also known as Juneteenth, Independence Day, Freedom Day, Emancipation Day, Jubilee Day. But it has remained a beacon of hope and a platform to the Black community, a real symbol of liberation. So the aim of Juneteenth from years ago, I think, are still very, very relevant today. Big, broad categories: reflect, celebrate, educate, and advocate for justice and equality for Black communities throughout the world. Not much has changed about those aims. Not a whole lot. Okay, but back to the history a little bit. I love this stuff. President Abraham Lincoln, the great emancipator, he was known as that also, signed into law the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863. The proclamation proclaimed or declared that slaves were free in those states at war with the United States of America, the Union. It did not include, though, border states or those territories that were under federal Union control. So this Emancipation Proclamation was really not out of the goodness of Lincoln's heart. It was a strategic war strategy. And the proclamation was really designed as a way to cripple the Confederacy's funding. Follow the money, cut off the money. It created a lack of workers, the slaves. By freeing the slaves, it would reduce the number of slaves that was needed to produce and work the cotton crops. And then what happened is that the cotton was sold to England for money, and that money would help keep the war effort going. So, in essence, it was to create even more economic chaos and destruction to those whose wealth and livelihood was so heavily dependent upon slave labor. Free labor, free labor, since way back in 1619 when the first slave ship, the White Lion, delivered 20 Angolans, way before the real start of this country, when we were just a colony, years before independence was declared, fought for, and won. So skip forward many, many years. During the Civil War, Galveston, Texas was an important port city and had been really under the control of the Confederacy, the Confederate Army. The Union Army landed in Galveston, Texas, and just seized control of the state and declared that the slaves were free. Now, this is 2+ years after the Emancipation Proclamation was signed and proclaimed back in 1863. Reading General Orders Number 3, standing on Texas soil, Union General Gordon Granger read, "The people of Texas are informed that by a proclamation from the executive of the United States, all slaves are free." Can't even imagine what that was like to anybody hearing that, especially to the slaves. So back to even though the Emancipation Proclamation freed all slaves in slave states, Texas was very remote and did not have the large-scale Civil War battles that the eastern part of this country had experienced, and therefore had no large-scale presence of the Union Army, which is one of the reasons why the Confederacy was able to maintain control over Texas. So also a lot of many enslavers had relocated to Texas, seeing it as a sanctuary and maybe a last place where they would be able to continue their slave practices. So slavery in Texas remained relatively unchecked and unaffected. And then, of course, you got to think about the time. I know it's hard to consider now, but thinking about, there was no fast way to get anywhere during that period of time. So when we consider the travel and transportation of that day, and especially also considering the extreme devastation of the war in the eastern states and locations. So in Texas, even though the Emancipation Proclamation had been signed and declared or proclaimed, slavery remained a harsh reality for years after the slaves are actually freed. So it was a choice that Texans made, to keep the slaves in slavery for their own financial benefit. Texas was the very last Confederate state to enforce, and that was probably with heels dug in, the Emancipation Proclamation. Now, I also want to note here, and it is important to note, that Texas was the very first state that made Juneteenth a state holiday in 1980. Other states followed, and gradually, at the time of my research and before this became a federal law or federal holiday, there were in excess of 45 states recognizing Juneteenth in some way as a state holiday. So that happened over time and over the years. But looks like, this was definitely a holiday that was fast gaining the need for some federal recognition. Okay, so back to the history. And it's important to note that the freed men and women, the former slaves, began the very next year of celebrating what they were calling Jubilee Day. So the Emancipation Proclamation's main point was that all enslaved individuals in Confederate states in rebellion against the Union, quote, will be then and forward forever free. It did not immediately release any enslaved individuals or apply to any slave holding or or border states that were not slave holding, or include any provisions for what or how the slaves would move forward with this new freedom. So yeah, there was a lot of ambiguity and certainly reluctance on the part of the Texans to follow any kind of union issued proclamation. I don't care who signed it, unless it was enforced with Union troops. So the period of time was very chaotic. It was toward the end of the war. This was the spring of 1865. A lot was going on in the country. General Robert E. Lee had been defeated. He was the Confederate general. He had been defeated and had surrendered in early April of 1865, and the Union forces were pushing further and further into the Confederate South, enforcing President Lincoln's orders. So you've got all that kind of going on. So again, it is especially of interest to note that Juneteenth became and is the longest running African American celebration commemorating the abolition of slavery in the United States of America. Freed slaves started celebrating it the very next year. Juneteenth has endured the horrors and complexities of Reconstruction during the Jim Crow era, where Juneteenth served as a safe place to come together to celebrate heritage, to be a platform for Black culture, food, and musical traditions. And during the 50s and 60s, civil rights movement, definitely a platform. The Poor People's March, it's just an example of serving as a rallying point and place for ongoing struggles for racial equality and social justice, and so on into the modern period. And that has continued to be a tradition today. So going back just a little bit to explain some of these terms, Jim Crow, there was no person named Jim Crow. Jim Crow was a legal system of racial discrimination in every aspect of life through a series of, again, legal state laws enforcing racial separation. And this was everywhere. Public spaces, think water fountains, places to eat, bus and train waiting rooms, buses, modes of transportation, employment, and education and housing. Everything was based on these legal state laws. But Juneteenth celebrations during these periods continued. They continued by serving, as a beacon of hope and resilience and a platform for political activism, whatever it was that was going on at the time. When I personally think back, I think Jim Crow, racial segregation, discrimination, I think it just seemed to me that this is an example of not knowing any better or not knowing any different until you really do. Because as I said, I grew up in the segregated South. I attended segregated schools all my life. I always felt like I received a great secondary education. I still do. I never felt that my education was lacking or second class because I didn't know any different. I think that was largely due to our teachers who were all Black and had tremendous amounts of pride. And they showed us that pride every day in the classroom, in the hallways, in the lunchroom. It was evident to me, especially coming of age, in the 1960s, during the height of the civil rights movement. I started to feel and sense the difference, and it became not okay. It became not okay. Our textbooks in school were used. Our textbooks had other kids' names written in them. Many of the pages were underlined. A lot of the answers were already written in. Some of the pages were even torn out. Some classes didn't have any textbooks at all. Our Spanish and French classes had no textbooks, no workbooks. But we learned. Our desks were written on. Gum was stuck on the bottom. We had a library, but sometimes there was only one copy of a particular book. I remember the library for me was a refuge, because I loved reading and it was just a magical place to go and learn things. I remember one summer though, I read everything in a designated section, or whatever section I was reading. I read everything, and the library would just shake her head because, she said there's, unless you want to reread, which many of the books I did reread. And then I started just reading reference books. I couldn't check out the reference books, but I would go to the library and spend hours just looking through and reading the reference books because it was a safe place to go in the summer. We didn't have air conditioning there, but there were fans. And it was, I don't know, it felt cool to me. So the library was definitely a sharp, sharp difference. It's like, how do you run out of books? How does your school not have a pool when every other high school in the county had a swimming pool? This is Central Florida, remember? So we knew that there were state colleges and universities, but we didn't even think about trying to go to them because we just didn't know or think that we could go, even though our tax money was paying for them. And heck, we probably paid even more taxes than other folk. but we couldn't go to those schools. Okay, back to the present, back to the present. So the Juneteenth holiday is, as of now, designated as a federal holiday. Congress formally approved the resolution back in June of 2021, and President Biden signed in signed the resolution proclaiming it a federal holiday, June 17th, 2021. So just a fact here. I don't know if you knew or not. I don't know that I remembered this. But anyway, Congress or the president cannot really declare a national holiday that binds all states. They can only declare a holiday that affect federal employees. Now, this is every federal employee in all of the states, but if you're not a federal holiday and your state doesn't observe the day as a state holiday, then you may not get the advantages of that. So, states must create their own list of holidays and commemorations. So by the time the feds had acted on this particular holiday, there are 45 plus states that had already approved Juneteenth as a holiday or some type of commemoration for their state. Of course, hanging on right on in there was the example of Arizona, which, if some of you may remember, back years ago when Martin Luther King Jr. Uh, holiday was created, Arizona was a holdout. So Arizona is an example of a state that can decide, we're not commemorating that, we're not celebrating that. And until Arizona got some big time pressure from a lot of the sports events that pulled out and canceled, they just held out and um, didn't observe it. I know a lot of people, I was one of them, that made sure that I did not spend any money in Arizona until things changed. So that was just my own little way of protesting. So just some key important figures, people that helped push this forward. So there was a former, or is a former, state representative from Texas. His name is Al Edwards, and he's actually kind of known as Mr. Juneteenth because as a freshman Texas legislator, he advocated that Texas make Juneteenth a state holiday. A freshman legislator in Texas. And guess what? In 1980, he was successful. It became a state holiday. Actually, the first state to declare Juneteenth as a state holiday. But you know what? It's Texas, so I guess it was fitting that it occurred there. So another key person in the fight to make Juneteenth a federal holiday is known as the grandmother of Juneteenth, and her name is Opal Lee. Now, Miss Lee at this point is like 97, and she was present when President Biden actually signed the bill in 2021. So this great grandmother is credited with having collected 1.6 million signatures, over 1.5 million signatures, advocating to make this a federal holiday. She presented it to Congress with no success. So she continued on. In her late 80s, because this woman started this process when she was in her 80s. So she walked from Fort Worth, Texas, her home, all the way to Washington, D.C. to bring awareness to the holiday. Again, no success. She kept on. She kept on. She didn't give up. And as I said, at 97, she was actually present when President Biden signed the bill. So another very very high-profile activist, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, also of Texas. She's from the Houston area. She actually co-sponsored the bill, Juneteenth Independence Day Act. She had introduced similar legislation for several years prior and had no success. And then finally, success in 2021. So is the Juneteenth, the federal holiday, controversial? Of course it is. So many questions. Why do we need another federal holiday? It costs too much money to give all the federal employees a day off. Hey, and quote, in quotes, they already have a holiday, Martin Luther King Jr. Day. Well, Martin Luther King Jr. Day was proclaimed a federal holiday back in 1983 and signed off on by President Ronald Reagan. So it's been a while. It really has been a while. But anyway, yes, definitely controversial. And of course, the timing. Lots going on, lots happening in this country during that period of time. The timing is questionable. What's Biden doing? What's he trying to get and gain from this? And of course, there's always a cultural insensitivity around a holiday that's, uh, especially to me anyway, Wise Black Nana's opinion here, if it seems to affect African Americans, that there seems to be uh, way more controversy than it should be. And there's the corporate hypocrisy of using Juneteenth and its advertising and its merchandising, appearing to support and promote the holiday, while at the same time union busting, espousing positive corporate social responsibility, while at the same time resolving multiple anti-discrimination cases after charges of racially related and discriminatory practices toward minority employees and minority consumers, even barring its employees from wearing pro Black Lives Matter buttons, t-shirts, or other related clothing. Remember, this is during that time when Black Lives Mattered just really came into being. And let's not forget our American practice of putting corporate profits above all else. So I'm reminded of the controversy and the big brouhaha. Brouhaha. You like that word, huh? Brouhaha over, the Juneteenth ice cream Walmart controversy and the ongoing efforts of trademarking the term Juneteenth on any and everything. So with the ice cream, the Juneteenth ice cream, there's a lot of considerable social media just outrage. And I remember being one of them that sent uh, not too nice notes regarding how could you name an ice cream? How could you do this? So many of these countries have pulled back, and I think Walmart took the ice cream off their counters, off their shelves. And they've slowed their rush to bring these products to market. Talk about cultural insensitivity. Juneteenth ice cream. But corporate profiting does not take a pass on Black culture. We have known in the Black community for years, and it certainly escaped us. But our community is often viewed, as somewhat of a cash cow when products are exclusively pushed toward the African American market, considered a significant financial incentive and lucrative, to whatever company it is that's pushing it. You know, think Starbucks, think Amazon, Walmart, Target. All of these companies have tried to use Black cultural events and dates of significance to their advantage. So the trademarking and the commercialization of Juneteenth, I don't think we've even seen the tip of the iceberg. In fact, as I was looking for information, for this episode or doing some research on this episode, it seemed that Juneteenth has more trademark registration and inquiries than all of the other federal holidays. Do we have 4th of July ice cream? Memorial Day ice cream? President's Day potato chips? Or cool drink? So it's just coming, and I think it's just a matter of time before these companies and their marketing machines figure out a way to ease into the Black community to continue, um, you know, um, um, reaping the benefits without necessarily doing much, to really help in that in our community. So I absolutely acknowledge that Juneteenth is both a festive and it's a very mournful period of time to commemorate. For me, the commercialization is a continuing concern. And as I said earlier, I joined that group that's outraged at the thought of ice cream, potato chips, beer, beverages exploiting an event that commemorates the abolishment of slavery 2+ years after the Emancipation Proclamation was signed. The whole thing about that just does not feel good to me. So while Juneteenth got an enormous upswing in support from all groups during Black Lives Matter, especially in 2020, when there were just major mobilizations on Juneteenth. It just seemed that it was like a perfect storm of events that came together that reminded all of us that of about Juneteenth and that this is a platform that could be used. So a closer look at the timing, kind of shows us that making Juneteenth a federal holiday had been slowly gaining popularity from way back because it has historically been largely used as a platform and a place to rally whatever current social and cultural relevant issues were occurring at the time. When we consider the modern Juneteenth holiday is to serve the present, it's so adaptable to current generations. Think of it as being pliable with multiple uses, a format for social harmony. So, in thinking modern, we think of it as being able to adapt and change and be whatever that platform is needed for that particular period of time. So, the celebrations themselves over the decades haven't changed a lot. There are new things that are added, updated all the time, especially, music has changed to fit whatever is more popular at the time. Um, Early on, there was more focus on spiritual music, gospel music primarily. But the same prayer sessions, the same barbecues, the symbolic and historic food, the church services, the sharing knowledge of current events and issues and other events, those are pretty much unchanged. Yeah, modernized to a large degree, um, changed, as I said, to fit whatever is currently happening. But primarily, the format is pretty much the same. Juneteenth today, I think, represents a day of reflection and call to action. It acknowledges the unfinished business of racial equality, the legacies of slavery and Jim Crow. It acknowledges all that. It's a call for reforms. It's a place for communities to mobilize. Juneteenth can be a catalyst for change. Think voters' rights, just educating new generations on the importance of voter registration. Building generational wealth. We hear that a lot. We need that a lot. And even expanding Juneteenth beyond our borders. Thanks to social media, Juneteenth, the message of Juneteenth is amplified. Juneteenth is global, and that is largely due to social media and our young people. So the thoughts I'd like to leave you with are Juneteenth, reflect, celebrate, educate, advocate. The aim of the holiday is just as relevant as it has been in a different time. Learn all you can about the holiday. Keep Juneteenth alive and vibrant all year. Teach and educate our young people, younger generations that didn't grow up in segregated times, that have no idea what I'm talking about or could even imagine what I'm talking about. Teach and educate other cultures about our history, because that's how we come together. That's how we learn and respect the history of others and learn and respect the history of ourselves. That old adage, each one teach one, tell our stories. They are unique to us and our families. This election is critical, and this one is especially critical. Start planning your vote. Advocate for that cause, a right, a privilege, a group. Advocate for teaching Juneteenth in our schools. Don't forget our civic duty. Don't forget our civic responsibilities. It's still pretty early on in the process. There's still lots to do. And then, of course, we want to continue to celebrate and keep our holiday alive in spirit and actions and call to actions. This is our history. This is America's history. We need to be proud of that. We need to own it, and we need to wear it. So our hope, Wise Black Nanas, is that the true meaning of Juneteenth shines through, that Juneteenth does not fall victim to the lure of commercialism, that is not just another day off, another long, fun weekend, or a pat answer to the question from a young person. Hey, Nana, what is Juneteenth? So that's our episode 13, Juneteenth. On behalf of Dr. Charlotte and myself, we hope you've gained even one insight or heard something that inspires you to learn more, to do more, to take some action. We know this podcast is not for everybody, and it is for a lot of somebodies. So we like to leave you with a little something to think about, a quote or a saying or comment that we call a Nanaism. So our Nanaism for this episode is a quote from one of my favorites, very favorites, Maya Angelou. In spite of everything that was done to me and my race, in spite of the adversity and the bitter moments, again, we rise. Thank you and take care. Please keep listening and subscribe to our podcast, and do leave a comment on our Facebook. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for tuning into our podcast, Wise Black Nanas. New programs of Wise Black Nanas are on the 1st and 15th of each month. Listen in as you learn more about Wise Black Nanas, Dr. Charla Walker and Joanne Early. They are everyday nanas. They are not famous, not celebrities or rich, well, rich in life and its experiences. We want you to come back. Tell your friends. So, look for Wise Black Nanas podcast wherever you find your favorite podcasts. Learn more about them and the coaching services they offer at www.wiseblacknanas.com.